Hey guys, and welcome back to the fourth video in the Compass Games Learn to Play series for The Last Gamble. In this video, developer Rich Hoffman is going to cover the first segment on the various aspects of combat. So let's get started putting steel on target. Over to you, Rich.
Hello gamers. In this TLG Learn to Play video, I'll cover the combat phase. TLG combat is covered in section 7 of the game rules, and it applies to all combat in the combat phase and in a limited way during the reserve combat in the exploitation phase. TLG combat is less complex than movement and uses the map, the unit counters, game markers, and just 4 player aid cards, which I'll show right here. Okay, the first is the combat modification chart that is used to calculate combat strength and combat odds. The combat modification tables that are used to determine which side has an advantage in certain combat situations. The artillery modification table that indexes artillery barrage strength in various situations, and the combat results table that indexes and describes the combat results and their effects on units. I'll be using the setup for the Wacht am Rhein campaign scenario that starts on 16 December to illustrate this video, so let's get to it. All right, in the combat phase, which is section 7 again, first is some general rules that apply to all combat situations. The first is the player who's conducting his or her player turn is the phasing player or the attacker, and the player who is not conducting his or her player turn is the non-phasing player or the defender. The attacker can directly attack enemy units that are adjacent to his or her own units. Non-adjacent units may be attacked with artillery, and I'll just use Simbarath right here, this unit, which can be attacked by these 3 directly and by this artillery unit indirectly. The attack strength of a single unit is unitary and may not be split up for different attacks. So if this unit wanted to attack the unit which is southwest of him, he could do so with a 2, but he could not split up different attacks and say, I'll attack him with a 1 and him with a 1. A unit or a multi-unit camp group or task force may only attack once per combat phase, and no enemy unit may be attacked more than once per combat phase. There are 2 exceptions to this during an engaged or an unresolved battle combat result that we'll get to later. The Allied forces of different nationalities may not conduct joint attacks and may only conduct joint defenses if they're forced to occupy the same hex during a retreat. German units may attack and defend together with one limitation that we'll get to later. Lastly, the attacker may make as many or as few attacks as desired, resolving the battles one at a time in any order desired. Next, I'm going to talk about combat frontage and multi-hex combat, which is Rule 7.1. 1 or more combat units may attack or more enemy-occupied hexes, provided that every attacking unit is adjacent to or within artillery range of each defending unit that it attacks. And this is important, and I'll use this same illustration here. If mostly you're going to see attacks conducted against one hex because that gives the best strength odds, best combat odds, etc. But the game does allow you to attack more than one hex at a time. We'll just use these 2 hexes. These 3 German units with attack strengths of 2, 2, and 2 for a total of 6, and this artillery unit with a barrage strength of 5 could attack this unit alone, or it can attack both of these hexes of units if they wanted to take the risk in doing it. The reason is that all 3 of these units are adjacent to this one, and this unit is adjacent to the units that it is attacking, which is this one and this one. Now, I'm not going to run out the combat odds on this, but I'll tell you, they're awfully unfavorable. As a matter of fact, just attacking this unit alone is not a good idea for these, but we'll get to that later. The defending units must occupy a continuous line, and in this case, these are adjacent to each other, so they do. And the modified attack strength of all attacking units is combined into one single attack strength. In this case, as I said, it's 4 and 2 is 6. And the modified defense strength of all defending units is combined into one single defense strength. So in this case, it's 3 because we use the defense strength number. And for these, it is another 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, plus 3 is 12. So you can see that if a group of units with attack strength of 6 wants to attack a group of units with a defense strength of 12, they're already at bad odds, and it just gets worse from there. The terrain used to determine which row on the combat results chart to use is that most favorable to the defender. And again, in this case, we've got rough terrain with a town in it, rough terrain with a town in it, but there's also a west wall hex here, which means the most favorable terrain for the defender is west wall, which adds a whole new dimension to it because west wall doubles the strength of the units that occupy it. So instead of being a defense strength of 3, this unit is now a 6, which makes the odds against the attacker even worse. The next thing I'll do is talk about the terrain effects on combat, and we're going to do it one type of hex at a time. Clear hexes, which are these two and all of these up here. For armor units, they attack into these hexes at double strength unless one or more of the defenders is an engineer, an anti-tank unit, or a flak or anti-aircraft unit, and those have a D0 combined arms strength rating. And I'm just going to use this unit down here to show that it's a flak unit and he has a D0. Armor units defending in clear hexes at double strength, unless they are attacked by other armor units that can claim an armor superiority or combined arms advantage. Cities and towns negate this advantage. So if a armor unit is in a city or a town, like this one, then they defend at their normal printed strengths. The next type of terrain is rough hexes, which are these in here, and woods hexes, which are these here, and they don't affect combat except for their values on the combat results table. Forest hexes, however, very, very severely affect combat in that armor units attack into forest hexes at full strength along highways and roads, which are the red and the yellow ones. So I'll just use this hex right here. If an armor unit attacks along this road or along this highway, they can do so at full strength. But they attack into forest hexes at half strength, fractions rounded up, along trails or across non-road forest hex sides. So if an armor unit attacked from here, that would do so at half strength. If a defender were here and an armor unit attacked into rot, he would also do so at half strength. Armor units that exert a Zoc, like this one, or are stacked with infantry units, defend at full strength in forest hexes. Players may claim a combined arms or armor superior advantage in a forest hex only if one or more of their armor units attacks or defends along a road or highway, but not a trail. So that goes along with what we said here. Armor units by themselves do not defend in forest hexes very well. They need infantry to do it. That's why they are half strength defending in forest hexes unless they have an infantry component in their formation or they're stacked with an infantry unit to provide that defense. Marsh terrain, which are these two hexes here, is the next one we'll talk about. And armor units attack at half strength into marsh hexes regardless of the presence of roads, highways, or trails. And you'll find that on line 4 of the combat modification chart, which I'm going to bring back up here. Line A4 is that one. Players may claim a combined arms advantage or armor superiority advantage in a non-forest marsh hex with marsh terrain, but we'll talk to that more later. Severe terrain hex sides are the next thing we'll talk about, and those are the ones that are here, and even here. And armor units attack at half strength across severe terrain hex sides, regardless of the presence of roads, highways, or trails. And this is also line A4 on the combat modification chart. And the number of severe terrain symbols along the hex side are immaterial. So it can either be 1 in this case, or it can be 2 in this case. I'll next talk about fords, rivers, and waterway hex sides. Non-artillery units of any type attack at half strength across fords, rivers, or waterways, regardless of their crossings. And this is line A5 on the combat modification chart. Armor units may only claim a combined arms or armor superiority advantage when attacking along a highway, road, or across an intact heavy road, rail, or heavy tank bridge. So, for example, this armor unit, if he wants to attack into this hex, He can do so along the road. But if he wants to attack across this X, he's going to be limited in that he can attack across it at half strength, but he's not going to be able to move across it if he wants to advance after combat. Next, I'll talk about lake and reservoir hex sides, which are these. This one, these, and these are all reservoirs, and they're the very large water symbols. Non-artillery units may not attack across them at all. Even this little piece right here, which is a footnote in the game rules. Next, I'm going to start talking about settlements, the smallest ones first. Points, an example would be this one down here in 4508, have no effect on combat. They're just monuments, and you can do what you want around them. Hamlets in 4711, I'll just go down here a little bit, like Worthfield, offer a step loss and hold option to a battalion-sized unit. Regimental-sized units must retreat on any D or defensive combat result. Castles, and I have to scroll down here to see this castle at Beaufort. One defending infantry unit may add 1 defense strength point, and this is line E1 on the combat modification chart, and armor units that exert a ZOC, and all defending infantry units may exercise a step loss and hold option. Artillery, anti-tank, flak, and anti-aircraft headquarters and non-ZOC armor units must retreat on any defensive result or D result. When a castle also contains an improved position, and it's possible to build one there, the +1 defense strength point is ignored because an improved position doubles the defense strength of an unit that occupies it. The next I'll talk about is villages, and I'm going to go back up here. And villages exist almost everywhere. Here's one example. All units defending in a village may exercise a step loss and hold option. The next is towns, and again, there are many. Here's one example here. All non-armor units and armor units that exert a ZOC defend at full strength in towns. Armor units alone that do not exert a ZOC and are not stacked with infantry defend at half strength in towns.
This is line C4
of combat modification chart. Artillery barrage attacks and offensive fire support fire into towns at half strength, fractions rounded up, and this is line F1 on the combat modification chart. And a town defense receives a -1 or defensive combat odds shift, which is line T down here on the combat mod chart. And all units defending in towns may exercise step loss and hold option, which is line T on the combat modification chart. More on that later. Next, I'll go to cities, and I'm going to have to move a little bit on the map to the left to Verbeers here. And this is defensive terrain, very similar to towns with one important exception. All non-armor units and armor units that exert a ZOC defend at double strength in cities. So if there were a unit with a strength of 4, it would be a strength of 8. Armor units that do not exert a ZOC and are not stacked with infantry defend at half strength, fractions rounded up in cities. This is line D2 of the combat mod chart. Artillery barrage attacks and offensive fire support into cities fire at half strength, fractions rounded up, and all units defending cities may exercise a step loss and hold option. More on that later. Back to the northeast corner. West wall terrain is second to last I'm going to talk about. And west wall terrain are these hexes with the triple diamonds on the map. And these are the heavily engineered defenses along the German border. They're in 2 bands, one to the west here, one to the east here, and further south just by a bit. All units defend west wall terrain at double strength and may exercise a step loss and hold option. So this unit is occupying west wall. Without the improved position that it's enjoying here, it would have a defense strength of 4. With the improved position, it also has a strength of 4, and we'll get to that next. Okay, but this unit, as we talked about before, now has a defense strength of 6 because he occupies west wall. German units defending west wall terrain earn an additional -1 combat odds shift, which is line W on the combat mod chart. And armor units attack at half strength into west wall terrain and may not claim a combined arms or armor superiority advantage, regardless of the presence of roads, highways, or trails. This is line A4 on the combat mod chart. Artillery barrage attacks and offensive fire support fire into west wall terrain at half strength, which is line F1. And you can see the way we have this chart built, that every terrain situation that affects a unit's strength or has an effect on a combat odds shift is listed on this chart, and it's the number one chart that you'll be using besides the combat results table to determine how to build a combat and the calculated attacks. The last terrain we're going to talk about is an improved position. There are two of them here. Units defend in an IP or improved position at double strength and may exercise a step loss and hold option, which is line D3 on the combat modification chart. And artillery barrage attacks and offensive fire support fire into an IP at half strength, fractions rounded up. Okay, so our two examples here. This unit occupying a improved position doubles its defense strength for 6. This unit occupying a improved position as a double its defense strength of 4. And that's all for terrain effects on combat. The next issue we're going to talk about is morale, which is new to TLG and a factor in every combat and headquarters unit which has a morale factor or a morale value. It ranges from 1, which is good, to 8, which is bad. And I'm just going to show that this particular unit has a morale value of 6, which is fairly poor. And that value, when they're compared among the units that participate in combat, provides a favorable combat odds shift, either +1 or -1, to the side with the best morale in any battle. If there is combat between two units with an identical morale, such as this one with a 4 and this one with a 4, ties offset. Artillery units may not confer their morale rating to a stack of units unless they are attacked directly by non-artillery units. And I'm just going to come down here and show that in this X, we have 2 units, one of which is a 6 and the other is a 4. Normally, the paratroopers would provide the morale advantage to this, but in this case, the artillery is tougher from a morale standpoint, and the morale for this defense would be considered a 4. Back to the northeast corner. The next thing I'll talk about is combat coordination, which is a strong force multiplier in World War II combat. And it provides one or more favorable combat odds shifts to units of the same division when they fight together. A few prerequisites apply. The first is unsupplied and fatigued units may earn a defensive but not an offensive coordination benefit. Isolated units, disorganized units, or disrupted units cannot earn any combat coordination benefits. Units from up to 2 divisions may participate in a battle and receive combat coordination benefits. Units from 3 or more divisions forfeit all combat coordination benefits, and that's important. And Army and Corps level units are exempt from this restriction. So in this combat here, we've got the U.S. 14th, 18th Cavalry being attacked by 2 units of the 18th Division, that's 294th Regiment and 295th Regiment. And we've got a regiment of the 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division, which is the 2nd Division in this calculation. And we also have an Army level unit, 5th Panzer Army 244 Sturmgeschütz. So this meets the 2-division limit. If we had another ground combat unit, such as an SS unit participating from somewhere else, it would forfeit all of the combat coordination benefits for the German. The number of combat odds shifts earned for coordination benefits depends on the type of attack and defense conducted and are easily cross-indexed on the combat coordination table below. And I'm going to show that right here. The combat coordination table is here. And depending on what type of attack and defense you have, you just cross-index on this table and you'll determine what the combat odds shift should be. So there are a couple of types of defenses and attacks that can be conducted here. An uncoordinated combat, 4606 and 07, which is between these 2 units. An uncoordinated combat is an attack or defense with non-division units or less than 2 same division units, and it doesn't earn any combat odds shifts. So an uncoordinated attack, uncoordinated defense, 0 combat odds shifts. A coordinated attack is 2 or more units from the same division, and that earns a +1 combat odds shift. I'm going to go down here to this one and say that they're 277th Division, 277th Division plus a 12th SS unit. There are 2 attacking units from the same division, and in defense, there's only 1. So a coordinated attack against a non-coordinated defense, +1. A coordinated defense is when 2 or more units from the same division are stacked together or adjacent to each other, and they earn a -1 combat odds shift. Additional units can participate, but they do not increase the benefits. So additional units of the same division. And that can be seen down here where we have a 28th Division unit, which is not stacked with anybody, but there's another 28th Division unit adjacent to him. These 2 units adjacent provide a combat coordination benefit, whereas this unit attacking by himself does not have one. So a coordinated defense, which is here, against an uncoordinated attack, is going to earn a -1 combat odds shift. Back to the northeast. A coordinated flanking attack is 2 or more units of the same division attack from non-adjacent hexes. And that would be this attack right here. We have 62nd Division unit, 62nd Division unit, and an attack from a non-adjacent hex side, or 3 different hex sides, or 4 or 5 or 6, against 1 unit here. These type of attacks or coordinated flanking attacks earn +1 combat advantage versus a coordinated defense. In this case, there isn't one, or +2 against an uncoordinated defense. And that's in the table down here. Coordinated flanking attack and against a coordinated defense, +2. The only exception is for units that have a morale strength of 1. This is a big difference here in that this unit has a morale strength of 8, so he doesn't qualify for that. But if he were a, let's say, U.S. Airborne unit with a morale strength of 1, that extra combat odds shift would not apply because units with a morale strength of 1 are expected to defend no matter where they are. The 2 division units need not provide the prongs of the attack. Another friendly combat unit can do that. And in this case, we've got the 160th Panzer Division providing the prong of the attack on the other side. Neither an artillery unit nor close air support may provide the flanking effect. Now, only 1 combat coordination and 1 flanking combat odd shift may be earned per battle. And even though they're not divisions, the German Führerbelgleit and Führer Grenadier Brigades and the British 29th Armor Brigade may earn combat coordination benefits because of their training so closely together. No other brigades can earn them. The next thing we're going to talk about is combined arms and armor superiority. And this is another huge force multiplier in World War II combat. And in TLG, we have an interesting condition here. Military doctrine in most Bolts games define combined arms as the coordinated use of armor, artillery, and infantry in an attack or defense. In TLG, the artillery and other supporting arms in each combat unit are factored together in their attack and defense strength values. So, for example, the artillery, which was part of this unit, it had an artillery battalion or multiple battalions in the 326th Division, and those are divided into the attack and defense strengths for each of the units of 326th Division. The Army and Army group level and corps level artillery units in the game represent massed artillery formations of multiple firing batteries and battalions that contained or controlled dozens to scores of cannons, guns, howitzers, and rocket launchers. A good place to see how we did this is in the German, US, and British order of battle sections of the historical study and the evaluation of unit combat strengths in the Ardennes, which is also in the historical study. And that'll show you how we did this for TLG. So when we apply combined arms in TLG, we only involve non-artillery units in the calculation. So there's two parts to combined arms and armor superiority. The first being combined arms. I'll talk about that first, just in section 7.5.1 of the rules. A combined arms advantage is based on the types of units participating in the battle that are easily cross-indexed on the combined arms table, and that is this table up here. The unit types are determined by the letter preceding the combined arms rating on their unit counter, and any of the participating units may confer the advantage for the whole battle. These different types of units, and I'm just going to use this hex here to explain them, are individual units, or I, and these units have both an armor and infantry component. And in this case, the unit on the right, the 12th SS, 12th Panzer Regiment, 2nd Battalion, has a white square underneath his defense strength indicating that he exerts a SOC and has an infantry component. The C units, or combined units, are either infantry or armor units alone, and the two units on the left exemplify this. And these units have to attack together or stack together on defense to earn a combined arms advantage. The other type of unit are armored defense units, and we'll use the flak unit right here to demonstrate that. These units can negate a combined arms advantage for the attacker or change it from a positive to a zero value. And an exception to these, there are two other types. There's the flak units, the engineer units also have a D0, and the anti-tank units, and one of them is underneath here, which is the Panzerjäger unit. All of these D0 units can negate that combined arms advantage as a defender, and the only exception is German flak units don't get to use this advantage during clear weather daylight turns because they're trying to defend themselves against all the Allied airplanes. The last type are non-listed units, which are Belgian, French, and are all artillery and headquarters units. And for example, this unit has a combined arms value of N0 or no anti-tank capability. The combined arms advantage is applied as an optional offensive or defensive modification to the combat results die roll that must be claimed, and I'll emphasize claimed, before the die roll is made. So for example, I'm just going to say that on this table, the way you determine it is look at the attacking units and see if they're infantry only, armor infantry, or armor only, or armor and infantry together, an independent unit, which has an infantry and armor component in the individual unit, or a multi-unit camp group or task force. Those exist on this line. And then you have the defending units, which are all of these. It's hard to see, but there is a line designating that. Infantry only, armor only, the same type of ones here. If the text contains engineers, anti-tank, or flak of those D0 units, and then there's headquarters and artillery units only, and they're in big trouble if they're attacked by themselves, okay? The combined arms advantage is applied as an optional -1 offensive or +1 defensive modification to the combat results die roll that must be claimed before the die roll is made. This allows the earning player to prioritize which units take the step losses first. Examples include this one here, where infantry is being attacked by infantry, and there's no die roll modification for combined arms. The next one is this one, where an infantry unit is attacking an armor unit, and infantry attacking armor has a +1 or defensive die roll modification here. The next one is infantry and armor versus armor alone, and this is an infantry with armor attacking an armor unit alone. Infantry and armor attacking armor unit alone gets a -1, which is an offensive die roll modification. And the last is armor versus armor, or armor and infantry versus armor and infantry, and the results are an AST or the armor superiority table. There's only two places on the combined arms table that occurs. And when it does occur, you take the attack and defense and you look for the strongest type of armored unit participating in the battle. For the Germans, they're on the left side. For the Allies, they're on the top. And you just cross-index which type of armored unit with which type of armored unit, use the best ones, and come to the following. For example, the German Mark IV Panzer, if he were attacking a Sherman, the result would be a D. And the three results which you can have is either a German armor superiority advantage, or Allied armor superiority advantage, or a D result, which is whoever the defender is. An armor superiority advantage substitutes the same die roll modifier for combined arms. So you'll have either one, you'll have a combined arms combat die roll modifier, or you'll have an armor superiority 1 if the result on the combined arms table is an AST for armor superiority table. And that's it for combined arms. The next thing I'll talk to is several special units which receive additional combat odd shifts based on their unique capabilities. The first are German Tiger tanks that receive a favorable +1 or -1 combat odd shift when operating alone or with other units. They can also earn combined arms and armor superiority die roll modifier, depending on their strength against another strength on this table or this table. They're pretty strong. This line U on the combat modification chart. German Sturm tanks receive a +1 combat odd shift against cities, towns, villages, hamlets, west wall, and improved positions when they are stacked with infantry units. And this is line V on the combat mod chart. Similarly, flamethrowing tanks receive the same modification for the same terrain. Only one of these combat odd shifts may be earned per battle. So if you have two flame tanks attacking the same hex, they're only going to get this modification one time. It's going to be a +1. The last thing I'm going to talk about special units is engineer battalions and their rather serious vulnerability. Any unit with a defense strength, which is a 1, which are parentheses around it, when it's attacked by itself, the combat results are increased on the combat results table. So I'm just going to go to the combat results table and say that an engaged result and a unresolved battle result are instead now resolved as a defensive 1, a defensive 2, or a defensive 2 with a mandatory step loss. This penalty does not apply when it occupies an improved position or is stacked with another combat or headquarters unit. And this was originally a lower penalty, if you will, but a recent errata change that happened just a few made this a little more severe, because when engineers particularly operated, as we said before, their units are actually located around the hex that they're in. But if they're concentrated for defense, such as occupying an improved position or stacked with another unit, those penalties are not applicable. The next thing I'm going to talk about is artillery. And I'll talk about the artillery modification table next. Artillery is used in an operational level supporting arm in TLG because of the size and organization of the artillery units. Artillery use has several prerequisites and limitations that must be observed for every fire mission. The first is deployment. All artillery units must be deployed, quote unquote, to conduct a fire mission. And I'm going to talk about this artillery unit is currently deployed because it's not flipped over to its moving side. If it were flipped over to this, it could not fire. So I'm going to turn them back. Artillery range and spotting is a function of having a combat unit adjacent to the target hex so that they can spot the artillery fire. That's pretty straightforward. Supply levels of the artillery units is really important as well. An artillery unit firing in general supply can fire up to its full barrage strength. An unsupplied artillery unit can fire up to half its barrage strength, fractions rounded up. and an artillery unit which is isolated cannot fire at all. And this is stated on the table here. In general supply and unsupplied, they can go full or half, up to full, up to half. But when they're isolated, they may not fire at all. Time of day is an important thing because it's easier to spot targets in the day than at night. So artillery fire, the barrage strength is up to full during daylight turns and half to quartered barrage strength for nighttime. And this is shown, we have on the artillery modification table, we have charts for daylight Allies, nighttime Allies, daylight Germans, and nighttime Germans. For example, Allies are either full or half. Germans at night for defensive fire support, we'll get to that in a minute, fire at a quarter, and they can be really severely affected by the time of day. The last thing is the type of target terrain which is being fired into. Open terrain is terrain which is empty of settlements, large settlements, like this terrain right here. Marsh, clear, rough woods, or forest hexes that are empty or only contain the following type of settlements. Villages, which are this type of terrain here. Hamlets, which are down here at that type of terrain. Or points, which can be this type of terrain, are open terrain, and artillery can fire up to full strength in those hexes. Built up terrain is the other type of terrain where you have either cities, towns, west wall terrain, or improved positions. Artillery fire into those, fire support in for barrage attacks, it's all halved, fractions rounded up. Those are all contained here for the type of fire mission and the type of supply and the type of terrain, whether it's open or built up. All you have to do is cross-index on this table and you can tell which one it is. Once you play the game, this will become second nature, believe me. There are 4 types of artillery missions in TLG. The first is a bridge interdiction fire that we covered in the movement video. The second is a barrage attack, which is an artillery-only attack against an enemy-occupied hex with several prerequisites. The first is only the attacking player can do it in their combat phase only. The artillery units can fire a barrage attack as its sole fire mission for that game turn. And an artillery unit cannot combine a barrage attack with direct ground attack because that is actually an offensive fire support mission. The range and spotting requirements must be observed for all the participating artillery units and their target hexes. And I'm going to use this one here. The range to this hex from there to there is 1. And as you remember from the introductory video, the range on an artillery unit is the black box beneath the morale factor. So the range is a 1 to the target, but the range for the artillery unit is a 2, so it meets that. And this artillery unit with a range of 4 also can reach that. So these 2 artillery units can combine to attack that hex. And multiple artillery units from the same 4 may combine their barrage strengths into 1 barrage attack. Again, using these 2 units, they're both from the 47th Corps, and they can participate in those attacks. The final combat strength of a barrage attack equals the combined barrage strength modified by supply, time of day, and terrain. So if these 2 units were to attack this hex, I'm going to get to one thing about German artillery units. They have 2 barrage strength values, 3 and 7 in this case. The one on the left is used if the unit occupies a hex which is west or to the left in this case of the west wall. And the value on the right is used when the unit occupies a west wall hex or is east of it. So in this case, it has a barrage value of 7 for this one. It has a barrage value of 5 for this one. Combined together, it'd be a 12. But they're going to fire into this terrain, which is occupying a improved position. So as we heard before, that would have the barrage strength of these 2 units from a 12 down to a 6. The combat odds shifts for German surprise attacks Germany is defending the west wall, and German ammunition shortages, which is an optional rule, apply. And those are lines R, line S, line W, and line double Z on the combat modification table. These are the combat odds shifts. And during barrage attacks, those apply. The combat odds shifts for morale also applies. So this unit, when it's attacked by a barrage attack only, it uses its morale and a 1 die rule to determine whether or not a combat odds shift applies to this unit, whether it'll be okay or whether it's going to actually be less effective. I'll let you read about that in the rule. And the last thing is artillery units are not subject to the effects of their own fire because they're just firing rounds downrange. They're not going to be affected by a combat result which would affect the units they're shooting at. Any D or defensive result is applied to the defending units only. So if this unit received a D result, he would have to affect it, but the artillery units would be unaffected. A firefight result, which requires 2 units that are attacking each other, if they have a firefight, they both take a step loss, would only apply to the defending unit in a barrage attack. And any attacker's result, unresolved battle, or engaged result is ignored when a barrage attack result occurs against the defending unit. The next thing I'm going to talk about is offensive fire support, which provides some or all of an artillery unit's barrage strength to the combined attack strength of friendly non-artillery units with several prerequisites. First of all, the phasing player can only fire this in their combat phase. Second, the artillery unit can fire offensive fire support and defensive fire support in the same game turn. So I'll get the defensive fire support in a minute, but this is an important consideration. Artillery unit which just shoots into a hex and tries to obliterate everything in a barrage attack uses up the whole time trying to affect that result. Offensive and defensive fire support is on-call missions with some or all of the artillery unit participating in any one time. And that is going to be a slightly lower value for the final result than a pure barrage attack. The range to the target hexes and spotting requirements must be observed for all participating artillery units and their target hexes. As we said before, the range to the target has to be within the range of both or all of the participating artillery. And multiple artillery units from the same corps may combine their barrage strengths into one offensive fire support value. So the example I used before is this unit has a 5, this unit has a 7, and they combine together for a 12 barrage strength for offensive fire support, but it's going to be adjusted for the terrain it's firing into, the time of day, and their supply levels. Next, the attacker allocates all of his or her offensive fire support before the defender allocates any defensive fire support. And this is really important. The final amount of offensive fire support, which is the points of attack strength, which you can combine with the non-artillery units, is either the combined barrage strength of all participating artillery units modified for supply, time of day, and terrain, or the combined unmodified attack strength of the supported non-artillery units, whichever is less, and whichever is less is really important here. The same example that I've been using, I'll get to this when we get to the attacks, but the attacking strength of this infantry unit is a 3, and even though the barrage strength of the 2 artillery units is a 12, which is adjusted down to a 6 for the improved position, the total amount of artillery fire support available to this unit, if it's attacking by itself, is 3. So it's 3 and 3 is 6. And I'll get to that when we get to this particular attack. Defensive fire support is the next fire mission that artillery units can fire, and they provide some or all of an artillery unit's barrage strength to the combined defense strength of friendly non-artillery units with several prerequisites again. First, the non-phasing player or the defender fires these defensive fire support missions during the attacking player's combat phase only. An artillery unit can fire a defensive fire support and offensive fire support each game turn. So in their attacking turn, they can fire offensively, and in their defending turn, or the player turn where the other guy's the attacker, they can fire defensively. The range to the defending units and spotting requirements has to be observed, but the range is calculated differently in offensive fire support and barrage attack. All our participating artillery units have to be able to reach the target hex. In a defensive fire situation, all of the defensive participating artillery units only need to be able to reach the defending hex. So that's an important distinction. The defender allocates all their defensive fire after the attacker allocates all their offensive fire. And this just gets to the call for fire process, where if the rounds are ready to come in, you could call for more and call for more. Finally, the final amount of defensive fire support is equal to either the combined barrage strength of all participating artillery units modified for supply and time of day only. The terrain is not counted in this calculation, or twice the combined unmodified defense strength of the supported non-artillery units, whichever is less. So for example, if this unit wants to receive defensive fire support, his unmodified defense strength is 3, so he could receive up to 6 defensive fire support barrage strength points from any one of the, or multiple of the defending artillery units he has around him that can range him. So this one with a 7 can provide all 6 of those. This one with a 3 could provide 3 of them, but if it combined with these 2, that would be 3 and 3 is 6. And he can combine it with the 3 here, and that would give him a total defense strength of 9. There are some special German artillery rules, which I'll talk to again. And the first is that Germany artillery units are printed with 2 barrage strengths. I talked to this once before. Depending on where they are, and X is occupying either in or east of the west wall or west of it. The second is there's one German artillery unit, which was a jack of all trades. That's the 2nd SS Panzer 502nd Werfer rocket artillery unit. And he can combine his barrage strength for barrage attacks or offensive fire support with any 1st SS Panzer, 2nd SS Panzer, or Army Group artillery unit. So for example, he could combine with this one. He could combine with this one. Lastly, the Germans have a rail artillery battalion, which is this one up here with the 110. And you'll notice that he has a range of 20. So it's the longest range artillery unit in the game. And the rail artillery may only support a full strength Camp Group Vonderheide parachute unit when he lands at full strength. If he lands at reduced strength or is eliminated on his landing, this unit may only conduct barrage attacks either alone or combined with other Army Group level artillery units. So HGRUB, he can combine with them. Otherwise, he's pretty much stuck because he was specifically there to support the parachute unit. Now I'm going to talk about close air support. The close air support are air missions that are flown by available fighter bombers in the combat phase that directly support friendly ground units. And to do that, I'm going to bring back up a friendly box that we had in the air phase, and combat modification tables contain at the bottom of them the close air support tables. And these are the ones we use for close air support. So close air support can only be flown for the same nationality as the air unit. So the U.S. flies for the U.S., the British fly for the British, and the Germans fly for the Germans. And oh, by the way, the French and the Belgians don't get to use air support because they did not have proper communications to support it. Close air support missions cannot be negated and are dependent on a die roll for success. And that die roll is down here on each of the ground attack support and ground defense support tables. So we'll talk to ground attack support first. The attacking player may fly these during clear or overcast weather when he has available air support units. These are fighter bombers, and they're going to be in these hexes here before. The allied player may fly them against enemy combat or headquarters units that occupy clear, rough, or woods hexes, but not in the forest because it's just too hard to find targets in the forest. The German player may only fly ground attack support missions against cities, towns, or castles in non-forest terrain. And that's because the German navigation wasn't quite as up to par, and they had to have pre-assigned targets that they knew where they were. The way you fly a close air support mission, and we'll just use the Germans as an example, is you take the air unit and you put it in the target hex. Up to 2 ground attack support missions may be flown per battle, but each one is rolled for separately. So we're going to do 2. And the results are on the table for ground attack support, which is down here. For the allied player, it's much easier to get a successful ground attack support. For the German, it's less successful, and the results are as follows. A +1 result yields a successful or positive combat odds shift for the attacker. A none result means that the aircraft missed and has no effect. And a -1 is a friendly fire result where the aircraft actually attacked your own guys. Once the units are done attacking, anyone with a plus result or minus result, you can just leave them in the hex, otherwise take them out. Ground defensive support is the other type of closer support mission, and the allied player only may fly them during clear and overcast weather after the German player has placed any ground attack support missions. The reason the Germans cannot fly ground defense support missions is they didn't have the command and control processes in place this late in the war to support that. The allied player may fly them for friendly units in clear, rough, or woods hexes, but not forest hexes as before. And when we fly a ground defense support mission, if the Germans were attacking, you would place the fighter bomber in the defender's hex, and you would go back to the table for ground defense support in this case, roll a die, and the results are as they were in the ground attack, only the odds are almost reversed here. Combat odds shift is located on line K and line L of the combat modification chart. It's +1 or -1 depending on the result. So that's it for close air support.